It was one of those days at the tail end of winter, when spring in some subtle way announced its presence. The hedges were still purple and bristly, the bleached fields full of quarrelling starlings. But there was no doubt about it, winter was virtually over. After a soft grey morning, the sun had slowly broken through the clouds, and every blackbird and thrush in Farmer Lucking's meadow began to warble and tune up. The willow tree by the Folly Brook showed silver buttons up every slender wand, and the old oak tree was enjoying the first warm rays of sunshine. At this spot, for some reason known only to itself, the Folly Brook turned at a right angle. Beneath the oak, the winter floods had laid bare the tangled roots of the old tree, so that here, in sharp contrast to the sunlight, all was dark and mysterious. Deep down in those shadows, something moved. From a distance, it was hardly visible at all, but closer to it was possible to make out a large nose and deep-set twinkling eyes. It was an almost human face, set well back in the shadows, and it seemed to be waiting for something. Up among the silver willow studs swung the blue-tit, splashed with colour as azure as the spring sky above. For the little creature down below, this was the all clear, so he leapt to his feet, and jumping over roots and pebbles, he scurried down the shingled beach. "Thanks for the signal, Blue Button," called the little man, and he stood warming himself in the sunshine. This, then, was Baldmoney, one of the last 4 gnomes left in the whole length and breadth of England. He had a long beard that came down almost to his middle. On his head was an old leather hat, and on either side of it the hairy leaf-shaped ears came level with the top of his head. His face was ruddy and lined with 1,000 creases which told of his great age. In fact, Baldmoney wasn't quite sure how old he was. He and his brothers had lived under the old oak for at least 800 years, or was it 900? He just wasn't sure. Blue Button flipped down leaf-like to the lowest wand of the willow tree and joined the gnome. They chatted for a while about mutual friends and how bitter the winter had been. "And your wife, Blue Button, how is she?" asked Baldmoney. But the little bird made no reply. Instead, a large tear formed in each eye. "Oh, dear, I am sorry, Blue Button. I know it's been a terrible winter, but never mind. Spring is here, and that means food, and anyway, you still have your children." But Blue Button was now so overcome with grief that he could stay no longer, and he flew away up the stream. For a moment, Baldmoney too felt sad. It was the same every year when the winters were harsh. So many friends lost through starvation and the bitter cold. And then he suddenly remembered. He'd promised to give the all clear to the others. They came out from the shadows together, rubbing their eyes and blinking in the bright sunshine, for this was the first time they'd set foot outside the hollow oak since the autumn. Sneezewort always had trouble waking up in the spring, and then... Achoo! That seemed to do it. The sneeze finally woke him up. Sneezewort was thought to be the youngest gnome, though no one was quite sure. His clothing was just like the others, but on top, he was different. For some strange reason, he had no beard, and though his head was covered in stubbly hair, it had steadfastly refused for some 800 years to grow any longer. Dodder was the oldest and wisest of the gnomes, and the smallest, but that was because he had a wooden leg made from an acorn cup and a stout thorn twig. Trouble was that it was always wearing out, and he spent half his time making new ones. But his beard was a beauty, and would have been Snow White had he not dyed it with walnut juice to avoid being too conspicuous. Secrecy, you see, was of the utmost importance to the gnomes. It was the reason they'd survived so long. Of course, they could well remember the time when there were many more gnomes about, but one by one they'd gone. For in this modern world, there were so many dangers. Newfangled farm machines, motor cars, insecticides which found their way into the streams. That was the trouble with humans. They demanded so much from the countryside, always putting their needs before the needs of others. Do you remember, asked Dodder, how in the old days we'd have a gathering of 20 or even 30 of us down here in the spring? Well, we'll never see those days again, said Sneezewort. Perhaps we should move on while there's still time. Get to Ireland. I'm told the little people flourish there. Well, I'd never make it with my leg, said Dodder. If only I could find something stronger. Then came the answer to Dodder's problem. For a kingfisher dressed in magnificent plumage came to rest just above their heads. Our respects, Your Majesty, said Baldmoney. You're just the one we wanted. Brother Dodder here requires a new leg of more durable stuff than thorn. We thought you might be able to help. A new leg, eh? Well, wood is no good. What you need is bone. Well, that's an idea, said Dodder. I hadn't thought of bone. Fishbone isn't tough enough, went on the kingfisher. But I'll keep an eye out and bring you something stronger. Well, that's very kind of you, Your Majesty. Not at all, replied the kingfisher. And with that, he was gone in a flash of blue. Wish that I could move that fast, said Dodder ruefully, as he gazed after the kingfisher. But in fact, it was amazing just how fast Dodder could move when he had to. And at that instant, there was a need for all of them to move, and fast. By the great God, Pan, that was close. I didn't hear a thing till the bang. Oh, we must be getting old. It was many hours later. The sun was on the other side of the world, and every living thing was cloaked in the soft tide of darkness. The Folly Brook murmured on through the night, its banks now cold, dark, and mysterious. Inside the hollow oak, however, it was a different story. Baldmoney, Sneezewort, and Dodder sat around the fire, quiet and lost in thought. They were surrounded by skins and twine, old rusty nails and other oddments. Above the fire hung 7 fat minnows being kippered in the smoke. Their narrow escape of the morning had made them think of Cloudberry, their brother. Cloudberry, the restless one, who many months before had set off upstream all on his own to find the source of the folly. I wonder if he survived the winter, said Dodder. You never know, said Sneezewort. Maybe he was caught by Giant Grum. For a moment, Baldmoney and Dodder stared wide-eyed at Sneezewort. The mere mention of Giant Grum was enough to put fear into any animal in these parts. Then Baldmoney spoke. You're quite right, Sneezewort. He may have been caught by Giant Grum, and it's time we found out what's happened to him. There must be many animals upstream who saw him pass by last year. I vote we set off on an expedition. Well, I'd never make it on this leg for sure, complained Dodder. He could take all summer long, and anyway, I think it's a ridiculous and dangerous idea. Oh, shut up and go to sleep, cut in Baldmoney. In fact, let's all go to sleep and think about it. We can discuss it again in the morning. So they climbed into their moleskin sleeping bags and dozed off, thinking about Cloudberry. And as they dozed, they snored. Meanwhile, Ben the Owl kept watch over them, as he'd done for years.